Hi, welcome to the drag and drop library demo video. In this video I'm just going to take you through the features of the library, and there'll be a second video where we actually do some coding together and put together some new drag and drop interfaces. So in the examples folder, in scenes, we have an example scene which illustrates a lot of what this library can do. So we'll play that. Play mode's tinted pink here, and we'll just have a look at what this offers us. So on the left here we've got a Torchlight Diablo style interface with a backpack, a belt, which can only take potions, and a sort of equip screen where you can put different items into different slots on the character. You can put boots on the character in the boot slot, rings in the ring slots. You can't put potions in there, but you can put potions in the belt, like so. Over on the right we've got a more kind of science fiction-y superhero type thing with a power set here of various powers which can be right dragged into this powers tray here, which you're going to think of these little buttons. This is like the player's power tray in an MMO sort of, and this might be a training screen where you're choosing which powers you've got slotted for a particular mission or whatever. Now, in the scene we have this player object, which is basically just a big bag of back-end data. So when you're making a game like an RPG, you'll often have a lot of data attached to the character, and you want a nice easy way of displaying that data to the UI and manipulating it, and that's what the drag and drop library gives. So on the player we've got an array of 4 charms, which is the belt here, an array of 20 charms for the backpack, which is represented here, and a list of 4 powers, which represents this, is represented by this thing here. We also have a power set, which is a little array of 4 powers represented by here. So if we have a look at the player script now in Visual Studio, you can see they've got a level, an array of charms for their belt, an array of charms for their backpack, and a list of powers for their powers, and then some individual charm entries here. If we have a look at what a charm is, go to definition, it's just a little scriptable object with the type it is, the colour, the level required to equip, and the icon, and it's got a little description function there. A power similarly is another type of scriptable object with an icon, a colour, and a very simple description function which you could override to do something meaningful, like say 5 to 10 damage, 20 meters range, whatever like that, if you're making a full-on RPG. Yeah, so they're just little scriptable objects. You can see them in the examples charms thing here. We've got things like the clodhoppers, some boots which are lime green with the boots icon I made, and the level 0, and that's these things here, the clodhoppers boots. The other 7 league boots require level 5, so we can't slot them just now. In the examples we also have powers. Punch, for example, is just a melee power with a sort of light green aqua type of tint to it, and that's all there is to it. So the player has these arrays here and lists, and when we move things in the drag and drop interface, like watch the belt here in the inspector, I'm going to swap the middle 2 potions around. That updates automatically. That updates automatically when we drag one out. If we throw one of these potions away, we've now got 2 null entries there. Similarly with the powers, we've got Punch, Laser Eyes, Force Field, and Fireball. If I right drag Laser Eyes into these 3 slots here, you see it's now Punch, Laser Eyes, Laser Eyes, Laser Eyes. Throw a couple of them out by dragging them out of the container, and we can drag more stuff in. So let's have a look first of all at this powers tray, because that's the simplest one. On the canvas, that's the player powers, and that has a powers UI script on it. And this is how simple this is. It's derived from object container list of type power, a generic class that's in the drag and drop library. You point it at the player, and you just go create slots, player powers, linking that player's list of powers to this container, and everything just works from there. So if you were wanting to display a list in the drag and drop interface, this is what you'd have to write to get something like that working. If we have a look at the powers UI here, we can see we've got a slot prefab. Now it's gone and made a little slot for each of the 4 powers in the array on startup, and it's organising them with a grid layout group and a content size fitter to size itself and lay them out in a nice grid with just one row there, 64 by 64 for each one. So that round slot is a prefab. Go to the scene view to have a look at it, and it's just an image, and it's got a slot script on it, which is part of the drag and drop library. If we go back now to the player powers, we also have power UI label prefab, which is the item prefab that sits inside the slot. Let's have a quick look at that. That's a prefab again. It has an icon. The power UI label's got the Unity knob background image. Then it has a little icon that sits inside there with a button with a labeled background and text on it. And the top level thing has got a power UI script on it, which has icon, label and mouse button. So mouse button 1 means you drag that with the right mouse. Let's have a look at this script, power UI. So it's derived from Draggable. Draggable is one of the heart of the drag and drop class. It's a little UI item that represents a scriptable object of some kind, or some kind of object, and you can drag them around with the mouse. Here we've defined an icon, image and a text label, and we have to override this function in Draggable update object. So obj is just the object that the Draggable's looking at. We cast it to a power. If it's a power, if we've got an icon, we set the sprite in the color to match the power. If it's got a label, we set the label text to the name, and we turn it off if it's not a power. And that's it. That's, what, maybe 10 lines of code to do that. Just set up a little object that can represent any power you like. Can represent force field, punch, whatever. It changes color, changes icon, and changes text when you look at it. So going back to the game, that's the powers UI there. The power set UI here, that's the power set. The power set here, the UI one, which will just toggle on and off, this one here, that has the power UI no label prefab, which is just a simpler version of the one we just looked at. It doesn't have a text label, but it's the same power UI class there. It has a different kind of slot, which is a bigger slot that allows us to display the name next to it. So we're only dragging this icon out and not the whole thing. We'll go into that into a bit. But we'll have a look at the power set UI code. That is an object container array, not an object container list like the other one we looked at, but a container array, because the power set powers is an array of powers. So we just call create slots again to link them up. And we've overridden an extra function here, is read-only, and that's why when we drag things out of here, they just snap back again. We never actually change this list here. So that shows you really how quick it is to put useful classes together with with this library. Let's have a look now at the Diablo 2 Torchlight end of things over here. So there we demonstrated an object container array and an object container list. Here we have the inventory. Toggle it on and off, you can see that that's that inventory there. And it is a charms array UI. So the charms array UI has a player, has a enum to say whether it's the belt or the backpack. This one here, for example, is our backpack for this player. It can take charm types of all, it can put anything in the backpack, and we've got this description text. That's just a little extra thing for this text at the bottom here. And once again, it's derived from object container array, and we just go player get charms of charm list. This is just a little utility function on the player that returns either the belt or the backpack arrays, which is just arrays of charms there. So charms array UI. We also have an extra thing. We've overridden the can-drop function, because here we're doing some checks to make sure whether we can drop things in there. Is it the right type of charm? Doing a little sort of bit mask here, and that's what allows us to set the belt, which also is a charms array UI, to the same player, but we have type belt here and charm type potion. So that means we can only drag potions into here. Yes, we can do that, but no, we can't do that. So this is another example of a object container array, but this time we've added an extra thing. We screen out what we can drop in where. It also means we can't stealth drop a hat in here by dropping a potion in there on top of the hat to swap them. You know, if it's two potions, we can swap them, no worries. But we can't use that to sneak a hat into your belt or an amulet or whatever. Yep, and you can see once again when we select the player, healing, healing, rejuvenation, we'll make that healing, healing, 2 rejuvenations. These arrays update. If we swap this healing potion in one of the rejuves, watch the inspector, they update automatically there. The drag and drop interface, once it's got a reference to these arrays, will keep them updated at all times. Now lastly, we'll get onto the equip screen. So the data that it's manipulating is these 7 members of the player here, the helmet, amulet, 2 rings, gloves and boots. So it's not an array, it's not a list, it's just 7 variables. Let's put some things in here. Now, notice we can't put this amulet in here because it requires level 5. Now, player is only level 0. So if we make them level 8 instead, we now are able to put that amulet in there. So it's gating. We can't put a piece of armor on our head. We can't put a ring on our head. In fact, when we go over any of the slots for this equip screen, it highlights the ones we can drop things in, which is very nice. As you can see, the royal headgear still needs level 10, so we can't put that on. We'll just put the tin hat on, and we'll put a pair of gloves on like that. And you can see that all fills out there in that array. So let's have a look at the equipped screen. So it's equipped. And it's an equipped screen here, special script we put together for it. So it has a reference to the player and a reference to some slots: helmet, amulet, ring, ring 2, gloves, boots and armor, and this array of slots here. So it starts off by assigning them and hooking them up to these pre-made slots here. And I'll just demonstrate that by stopping this. And you can see that this one, the slots are actually part of the scene. And then the equip screen has got references to them, to the head slot, the neck slot, the ring slot, and so on. So this one, a little bit more work had to go in because we're doing something non-standard. We've just derived from object container, which is the base class for object container array and object container list, and we're having to do things a bit more manually. So we're setting up our slots there and storing them in an array there for convenience later on. We override can drop again. If we try to drop an item into the slot, we make sure it's charm. If we drop it into empty space, that's fine. We check the player's level, If the charm's required level is greater than player's current level, we return false. And then we make sure, just in this if statement here, that only helmets can go in the helmet slot, and only rings can go in the 2 ring slots, and so on. And we have to override this drop function here. This is called when you do drop an item in and it's updating the back-end data. In the array and list variants, this is done for you. Here we're having to write the data that's in all the charms stored in the UI back into the back-end data for that to work. Yeah, so that's sort of one more level of complexity there in making that one. So that hopefully gives you a rough overview of what this library does. You'll notice as well, in all of these classes we have various events here. Like on drag fail, we play the audio source called whoops. That's when we try to put something where it shouldn't belong. Whoops, we get that noise. On drag enter and drag exit, this is on the equip screen, we call highlight slots. That's a little helper function, which is the one that makes slots highlight gold when we can drop in them and shrink down and turn grey when we can't drop something in them, which is, you know, nice and helpful for guiding your players through a drag and drop interface. Down here, we have these slots that highlight as well and make a good noise when you slot something correctly, and the whoops noise when you try to slot something badly. So you could use these to add particle effects to the UI if you've got that kind of tech, you know, add sounds, and so on and so on. Yeah, but the main thing to take away is that the whole point of this library is to simplify the manipulation of back-end data arrays and lists or other data types, so that you can make these very thin classes like the power set UI. Powers UI, I think, is the smallest one here. 4 lines of code is all it took to set up the ability to drag these things around in here. Okay, so that's that, and in the next video we'll have a look at some sort of behind-the-scenes coding and how to go and set one of these up. And that's it. Thank you.